Hi,
welcome
welcome
to
to
our
our
podcast,
podcast, Bridging
Bridging Voices.
Voices.
Hi, my name is Lindsay. I'm hearing.
Hi, my name is Sarah, and I'm deaf. We
We
both
both love
love
Jesus.
Jesus.
Let's
Let's
go!
go!
Yay!
Yay! Welcome
Welcome
to
to
our
our podcast.
podcast. We are so excited because this is our first episode of Bridging Voices, right? We
Yes,
were
that's
given a
right.
vision for this, and we are so excited to share with you all what God has laid on our hearts, right?
Right, yes. So I wanted to share a little bit with you guys about why we wanted to start this podcast. Really, the two of us want deaf people to form a relationship with Jesus and know who he is, and how the relationship impacts our lives, because it needs to impact our lives. So that's why we're doing this. First, we want to share a little bit about ourselves, how we grew up in our stories, how we learned sign language, and how we got involved in the deaf community. So, Sarah, you go
Yeah,
first.
sure. So, where do I start? My family is all hearing, and my mom and dad didn't know that I was deaf when I was born. I was the firstborn, so they had no one to compare me with. So they didn't know what was normal for a baby, like babbling and all of that. So when I was 2, my mom and dad suspected that something wasn't right. So they asked a doctor, why is she's not talking, she's not listening to us. And the doctor was like, oh no, she's just going through the terrible 2 stage and she'll be fine. And my mom and dad were like, okay, and they left. And then one day, soon after that, my dad was outside in the yard with me, and I was 2, and I was walking toward the street, and there was a car coming. And my dad yelled, Sarah, Sarah, Sarah. And I finally looked the 3rd time, and my dad said she has to have hearing loss. So they took me to an audiologist, and they confirmed that yes, I have severe, profound bilateral hearing loss. And soon after that, I got my hearing aids for the first time. My parents couldn't afford hearing aids, so Lions Club paid for my hearing
Oh, that's
aids.
cool.
And I have an old picture from the newspaper with me sitting on a horse with my hearing aids, and I'm smiling.
Aw, that's so
And it
cute.
was talking about how Lions Club paid for hearing aids for a little girl like me. But anyway, so soon after that, when I was 3, I started into the Deaf and Hard of Hearing program at NIA, Northern Illinois Association, in Geneva, Illinois. And there I learned C, so signed exact English, with ing, eds at the end of every word. And my teachers used SimCom, so they signed and talked at the same time. And that was my experience growing up. And I had a lot of speech therapy, and I also remember going to counseling with deaf and hard of hearing friends in a group setting with a counselor. And I loved going to school, and I loved learning and socializing, and I loved that there were other kids who had hearing loss too. We all wore FM systems. They were back in the day, very old-fashioned. You wore the receiver box around your waist and it connected to earbuds you would wear, and the teacher would wear a microphone. And so all of that was what I experienced growing up. And then in 5th grade, my teacher said, you're doing really well. Do you want to try going to your homeschool, mainstreamed with your friends from the neighborhood? And I was like, yeah, sure, I want to try that. So I wore the FM system at my homeschool, and not homeschool, it was in my neighborhood school with my friends. And I sat in the front, and I had accommodations to help me understand what the teachers were saying. And I also had a hearing itinerant teacher that I saw regularly. And I continued through, and then in 8th grade, I started to refuse wearing the FM system. I was sick of it. Ugh. And I did not want to wear it anymore. So, even though I sat in the front, my grades, they plummeted. And I was concerned because I was a good student and I cared about my grades. So I was like, oh no, what do I do? I don't want to wear the FM system anymore. And so my IEP team said, do you want to try a sign language interpreter in high school? And I was like, yeah, I want to try that. And it was the best thing ever. I was so happy to have an interpreter. I didn't have to wear equipment anymore. It was normal. I just felt free. And so I would watch the interpreter and turn and watch the teacher back and forth. It was perfect. It was a perfect setup for me. And then I finished and graduated high school, and then I went to NIU, Northern Illinois University, and I lived on the deaf and hard of hearing floor in the dorm in Grant Tower South. And there I met a lot of new deaf and hard of hearing friends. We would sign and socialize together. It was fun. And I met my husband there too. His name is Rick. And he didn't know any sign language, but he wanted to move into that dorm floor to learn sign language and to meet other people who had hearing loss too. He's more hard of hearing, but now he just recently, this year, got an osseous implant. It kind of looks like a CI, but it's different. The osseous is more of a bone anchored implant that helps with vibrations and hearing through bone conduction, something like that. But anyway, so he has an implant now. But anyway, so he and I got married, and we have 4 kids, and they're all hearing. But I stayed home with each of my kids for a while, and it was the best time. I'll never regret that time staying home with my babies. But then I did go back to work, and mostly as a hearing itinerant teacher. So I would help different deaf and hard of hearing students in different schools and different school districts. I would travel around, and I liked my job. It was very independent, and I liked that one-on-one time with my students. But then, just recently, about 4 years ago, I started my own business, and now I teach sign language to different homeschool Christian cooperatives or groups in the area. And I also work at Forte Academy in Joliet, and they have autistic children there. And I help the staff and the students learn sign language there. And I love my job. I love the freedom of my schedule and deciding who I work with. And now, recently, I'm very excited. God has laid it on my heart to help churches realize why it's so important to be deaf-friendly,
Right, yes.
and how to work that out. And so now I work with a few churches on how to become more deaf-friendly and make the gospel accessible for all.
Right.
Yeah, so
That's a big need for the deaf community. And deaf people in general. Doesn't matter the situation you grew up in, the church needs to learn how to better change themselves to adapt to the deaf community.
yeah, if
They need
schools
that.
can do it, then churches
Right,
should do it
yes.
more, because
Amen.
the truth is so important.
Right, yes.
More than any academic
Right.
information you can get.
Right.
Yeah. So that's my story. And if you have any questions for me, you can post your questions in the comments, and I will do my best to answer them for you, okay?
Cool.
So now, what's your story?
So my story is really, well, I'm going to condense it, but there are many different parts of my story. So first, what I think is really interesting to me is that as a baby, I actually knew 300 signs. And that was really shocking for me, because as a baby who knew 300 signs, my mom told me that and I had no idea. It actually explains a lot about me that was the first encounter with sign language I had. That I knew like baby signs. So I did grow up hearing. I went to a hearing mainstream school, and it was a good experience to me. I enjoyed school and classes and everything. But later in sixth grade, my English class had a topic about debate, and part of the class we could choose our own topic, something that we would present on, is how to connect to something we wanted to learn, something we wanted to do when we grew up, something that interested us. So the topic I chose was that I believe that elementary education should teach sign language. So that was really my first conviction. That's why I started learning ASL. So I went ahead with that topic. And for the project, I wanted more, I wanted to sign the whole presentation in sign language. And what you've got to know was I didn't know any sign language. I knew nothing. But that was fine. I went on the internet, started searching up sign language, and I practiced. And I practiced for my presentation, but my mom told me, no, you can't sign your whole presentation. You just can't do that. But I said, fine, I accepted that.
Yeah.
And I decided I would sign the first paragraph. So I spent a lot of time researching, and what I did was SimCom, signing and speaking at the same time. I made a lot of mistakes and I fumbled over my words, but my mom told me no. I just accepted it, but I did the first paragraph. I did it in SimCom. And then later, that was how I started learning sign language, just by myself. I would get books, I'd watch recordings, videos, YouTube, anything I could find. And I would learn from deaf people too, not just clueless hearing people on the internet. I'd learn from deaf people. I'd watch videos, and I'd go to the library and start collecting books. And so I'd flip through these books and watch my videos and flip through my books, and I would do that all the time. It wasn't really my hobby, but it was my interest. And it really interested me learning sign language. So in 8th grade, I continued learning by myself. And at that time in 8th grade, 7th or 8th grade, I started playing volleyball. And I did that at the same time I was learning sign language. And the volleyball, it was not easy for me. I had a really hard time. Got teased a lot, and I can go into more depth about that later. But sign language is how I could express myself. Something happened socially or at volleyball, I didn't do something right, I could sign about it, and I could feel better and become more confident. And I also could communicate with God through that, and I would sign to Him in my prayers and tell Him about my hard times in sign language, and really form a relationship with Him there. It helped me a lot become more confident through that. Plus, sign language for me, that was like I was doing that all the time. I would do that every opportunity I could. That was my conviction. I wanted to learn sign language. Growing up, I felt like I couldn't express myself at all. You know? And I couldn't express myself through talking, so I switched to sign language. It was better. And I don't know why that is. It's just a gift God gave me, I guess. But signing
Yeah.
was easier for me. And especially during hard times, like in volleyball, I could express myself. I felt like people would ignore me. So I turned to God and pray in sign language. It was my way of, communicating with God. It was kind of how I would cope.
Yeah.
That was how I could control that and manage that situation and a whole bunch of others growing up. It was the same way in high school, but I got involved in the deaf community. I started learning more signs, and my grammar improved a lot. It's more ASL, PSE mixed together. Even now, my
Yeah.
signing
Yeah,
tends
now
to
it's
be
PSE
more
for me too.
PSA and ASL mixed up. So when I went to college, at my school, yeah, there was no one there who knew sign language. I had no friends who knew sign language. There was no one.
Wow.
So I went to a deaf church every Sunday, and I went to different deaf events and, socialized with the deaf community. Then I'd go back to school, and there was no one who could sign. And again, I felt like I couldn't express myself. Because, normal hearing people don't know anything about deaf community. But I felt like the deaf world was a part of me. That's part of my life. It's how I express
There'll be
myself. And
isolation,
it feels
even though
kind of
you're hearing.
agitating. Yeah, that's right. That's right, exactly. Because that's the deaf
Yeah.
world. It's a big part of my life. It's how I express myself. It's how I grew up. It's how I learned to, cope through everything. And deaf people are so friendly and nice, and they want to socialize and form connections. And hearing people don't always do that. So I found, the deaf community. And it's great that I found that. That's what I've wanted all my life. That's why I became so involved in it. The deaf community is where I can express myself. That's why it's so captivating to me. And I work at a deaf school. I'm an education assistant. The kids are so cute. It's
That's
surprising.
wonderful.
So this year I've been working there 2 years, and I'm so excited to see what God has for me. In the deaf world, in the deaf community, I want to see what God's
Yeah.
plans are. I'm so excited. And so that's my
Yay,
story, just
that's
kind of
awesome.
summarized.
It's really
Yeah.
amazing to see how unique everyone's story really is. Backgrounds are
Right,
all
yeah.
different. You cannot assume that just because two people have something in common that they are the same in many ways. That's not
Right.
true. So, very cool. Thank you for sharing your story.
Yeah. Of course.
Yeah,
Thank you for
okay.
sharing your
So,
story.
if you like what you see so far, please like and subscribe to our channel, and you will see more from us soon. Okay, bye.
Yeah. Bye. Love you guys.